Welcome to another episode of Dialogue with the Dukes. I'm your host, Bill Berger, and today's show is being brought to you by the Truly Simple Boutique located at 134 West Herrick in downtown Wellington. Today, we are doing something a little bit different. We all know that the football season is done, so we're going to have a very short perspective on it. And I'm not sure that that's the right word, but we'll be looking at the football season, but what we're really trying to do is look to the future and looking toward the 2023 football season. To my immediate right, you should all recognize this gentleman, Coach Rob Howells, coach of the Wellington High School football team. And to my immediate left, we have Trey Moore, who is a freshman this year and will be a sophomore next year. And he is primarily on defense, so welcome to both of you. We're going to go first to the stats because I don't get to do this during the basketball season. Looking at the defensive stats for the year, Nathan Patfield was the leader in total tackles and assists with 85. The gentleman to my immediate left, Trey Moore, had 79 total tackles. Nathan Patfield led in tackles with 25. Trey had 21. Tackles for a loss, Nate Patfield led with 13. Trey had 3. In assists, Nathan had 60 assists, followed very closely by Trey Moore with 58. As far as sacks are concerned, the leader in sacks was Nathan Cross. He had 2.5 along with Anthony Schlager, who also had 2.5 sacks. The leader in fumble recoveries was also Anthony Schlager with 2. Interceptions, Trey Lawson had 2 interceptions along with Josh Nacella, who also had 2. The pass defense leader was Connor Shepard with 6. And those were the final stats on the year as far as defense was concerned. So, Coach, assess the season. That was the word I was trying to come up with. Assess the season. Yes, we were 3-7, but that doesn't really tell the whole story, does it?
No, it doesn't. It fell short of our record goals and postseason goals, but had a young team riddled with injuries early on. Missed a couple of key seniors for the majority of the year. But had a young team that gained some valuable experience to hopefully set that foundation for the years to come. And one of them is Trey Moore.
Mm-hmm. Well, Trey, I know that it's kind of hard to look into next year, but you can look at this past season. Kind of give me an idea of what you're looking for yourself as far as goals and what you think the goals should be for the team for next year on defense.
For myself, probably bring the team a little bit more energy. Stats, probably try to make a little 100 tackles. Next year I'm excited to maybe play a little offense. I'm really going to miss Patfield. He was going to be part of the team, especially defense. Yeah. Maybe a better record, but you can't really control that one person.
I have a question. You are basically as tall as I am, 5'8". You weigh actually a couple pounds less than me. How do you perform so well on the defensive side of the ball?
I don't really know.
Are you mean out there? Do you have an attitude out there?
Yeah.
Is there any trash talking allowed out there?
A little bit, maybe.
A little bit? Well, Coach, if everybody comes back, we'll have 33 returning people on the team, plus anybody that will come in as freshmen or people that we don't know that are going to be coming in. What do you plan as far as their part on defense for next year?
I think we have to pick up where we kind of left off. Again, Trey had those numbers and only made 5 starts for us. He played half a year, so we changed our defense halfway through the year and gave up roughly 10 less points per game when you compare beginning of season and second half of the season. So pick up where we left off. I think we got the bus moving in the right direction and continue to get the guys in the right seats on that bus and hopefully be as strong as we were to finish the year.
Good way to put it. Well, Trey, as I've already mentioned, you're going to be the leader on defense, at least as far as statistics are concerned. What kind of an impact do you feel that the team is going to have defensively? What kind of an impact do you think you yourself are going to have? And how do you, as now just a sophomore next year, how do you impact your knowledge and what you did this year going into next year?
Well, next year I'll know what I've done. I didn't start until I think it was a Grange week. and now I have all that knowledge from my freshman year, and now I have my sophomore year and more experience.
Mm-hmm. How do you see yourself as a leader on defense? Being so young.
Attitude.
Oh,
I
yeah.
gotta have a motor to go. Not saying all people didn't, but we could have had some more kids that have a bigger motor.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things I noticed, and this was a couple years ago, Drew Eubanks used to have an attitude, something fierce. Are you more of a Drew Eubanks person, or are you more of a teach by silent majority, something like that?
No, I'm gonna have to go with Drew. Can't be afraid of nothing.
Exactly. Well, Coach, we know that you already mentioned a little bit. We had a lot of mistakes from the DBs. How do you learn from those mistakes? How do you teach those mistakes? And will experience play a large part in the experience of the DBs going into next year? Because there are going to be so many of them back.
Yeah, and I think experience is a huge part of that. We had a lot of shuffling moving around, and again, the DBs that finished the year went to the same DBs that started the year, all with the exception of Trey Lawson. Mm-hmm. So that experience is going to help going into next year. And then for them, it's technique and drills over summer, and then film work. Studying the opponent, knowing the routes, knowing the coverage, and constant communication. I mean, unfortunately, as a Cleveland Browns fan, we see that almost every Sunday. There's a miscommunication. It's important that we gotta preach that and talk it and live by it.
Mm-hmm. Well, Coach already talked about the fact, Trey, that things changed halfway through the year. I'm going to have you tell me what Coach did to change the second half of the season, because we did win 3 out of the last 5 games. So what actually changed defensively that we didn't do in the first half?
I mean, we changed our whole entire defense. We put 5 linebackers or ends, and now we only have 3 linemen. So that could change because the other people were expecting different defense until half the season when we changed it.
Mm-hmm. How did either the motivation factor involved by changing it, or just by the change itself? How did that affect the other team?
I don't really know.
Okay, let's put it this way. Was there a situation where they didn't expect 3 down linemen versus the number of linebackers? So how did that manifest itself in the game itself?
Like they were expected to block a different formation.
Exactly.
And then we come out in this one, they didn't really know what to do. They had to change it right before the game.
Mm-hmm. And of course, changing on the fly, that's kind of tough,
Yeah.
Especially in high school, I would think. Exactly. Well, Coach, we had 9 sacks last year total. Would you consider normal? Is that about the right number that we would have? Or a better question is, how do you put pressure on the opposing team when you maybe only blitz a certain number of times? Do you blitz a lot, or is it a situation where it's just we got to put more pressure on their offensive plans, I guess is the right word?
Yeah, I mean, as a defensive coach, you always want to try to attack them offensively. And I think the way you do it changes as well. In the years past, unfortunately, I think 9's a low number for a team because we've had players with 9. Mm-hmm. And one of those injuries that we missed for all but 3 games is Devin Dietrich in Ohio returning the end and, broke his hand in week 1 and didn't get to play. I think he had 9 on his own last year. Mm-hmm. And also lost in Ohio the end to graduation. So, when you do it with 4 linemen, you try to create pressure with those 4 linemen, and maybe blitz 1 or 2 here. When you do it with 3 linemen, now you have to do more blitzes and things, and I think that's why you see the TFL numbers out of our linebackers, because now instead of letting them read and react, they end up blitzing and coming and, making plays that way.
Now, I won't hold you to this, but what does it look like for next year as far as putting pressure on versus the number of players that might blitz, or the fact that we maybe have 3 down linemen or maybe 4 down linemen? Well, obviously it'll depend on the people we have out there. But how do you foresee it looking into the future?
I would foresee it looking the way it ended this year. So we're going to have 3 down linemen, and we're going to bring pressure from those 5 linebackers any way we can. Probably bringing, 5, at least 4 every play, if not 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm. Now, is that going to be something that will evolve over the year, or is it, in other words, is it going to complete? You mentioned the Cleveland Browns seem to change every time. is there a communication factor involved too?
Oh, there has to be, and that's something that we got better at as the year went on. Again, with, a lot of freshmen starting at middle linebacker, that's typically your quarterback of the defense, and then you have some sophomore bodies around him, and then even the seniors that we did have playing, they didn't start last year and they rotated in. So that constant communication between all levels and getting those blitzes and stunts right is huge. It's critical, because if you got two guys in one gap and they hit the gap where someone else is supposed to be, it leads to big plays.
Yeah, well, we didn't discuss this, Trey, but, as the starting middle linebacker halfway through the year, was this something that you learned on the sidelines, or was this something that coach taught you as far as how you're going to react as he said, the quarterback on the defense?
Well, experience, like practice helped us a lot, and Pat Field played middle, so he taught me a little bit, and then just experiencing, and then you get to watch from the sideline in the beginning, and then just experience, you gotta learn on yourself sometimes.
Were you kind of surprised that you were put under such pressure midway through the season, or were you expecting it and wanting it?
No, I was expecting it and wanting it, especially with Hayden Fleming getting hurt. Then I was the second string, so then I got bumped up.
Well, that's a good thing, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, we'd like to thank both Trey Moore, one of the leaders this year on defense, and I think is going to be the leader on defense next year, and Coach Howells for talking about the defense. When we come back after this message, we'll talk about the offense and what we look for the future for the offensive side of the ball next year. This is Dialogue with the Duke. We are back. We hope that if you ladies in the audience would like to go visit the Truly Simple Boutique, they have women's clothing there. And guys, if you want to look for a present for your special person, you can go to the Truly Simple Boutique located at 134 West Herrick in downtown Wellington. During the first half of this episode, we talked about the offense and how it did very quickly, how it did last year, but looking more to the future. That's what we want to do this time. We talked about defense in the first part of the episode. So with me, to my immediate left, we have Alex Frenk. Alex was a freshman this year. He participated only, I believe, one time as far as passing this year, but he was 100%. He was 1 for 1 for 9 yards. So Alex, not only that, but you were also the leader as far as extra points. You were 80%, 16 for 20, and booting the extra points. And Coach, as I said, we don't have to worry about a place kicker. Each year we've had to worry about place kickers, who it's going to be. We've got Alex now for the next 3 years. So before we go into talking about the offense, I want to go through the stat leaders. Landon Wright, he completed 103 out of 169 attempts in passing for 61% for 1,311 yards. His longest was 68 yards, and he was involved with 8 touchdowns. And as I mentioned, Alex was 1 for 1 for 100% for 9 yards. C.J. Poland, before he had some injury problems, he was 24 for 43 or 56%. So he also played a big role from the quarterbacking side. Rushing stats, Nate Patfield, he had 140 attempts for 749 yards, resulting in a 5.4 average. He had a long of 54 and had 6 touchdowns. As far as receiving stats, once again, Nathan Patfield, he had 30 receptions for 368 yards, averaging 12.3 yards, and his long was 68, resulting in 1 touchdown. And as far as returning stats were concerned, Josh Nasella, he had the most returns. He had 23 for 612 yards, averaging 26.6, and the longest was 96, and he did have 2 touchdowns in returning for the team. Landon Wright had the most scoring as far as the total points were concerned. He had 11 touchdowns for 66 points, and the gentleman to my immediate right, Alex Frenk, he went, as I said earlier, 16 for 20 or 80% as far as extra points were concerned. So congratulations on the offensive side, and we will talk a little bit more about the offensive side with both Coach and Alex. So first question to you, Coach. Again, assess the season from the offensive side of the field.
I get the same thing. Young guys, young quarterback. that ended up playing the year. CJ started the year and had injury issues and did well when he was in there, as you saw with the numbers, but got hurt in that week 3 game, and the plan was to have a 2 quarterback system all along. They both had a tight summer, and really kind of happy with the way that worked out, because then we were able to use CJ in the running game and passing game and get him involved other ways. Our biggest thing, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, is we have to find more ways to be consistent in scoring. We did some nice things moving the ball, but we haven't finished drives.
Right, exactly. Well, I'm going to ask the same question to you, Alex, that I asked to Trey. I know the season's done, but looking forward to next year, what are the goals for yourself, and what do you feel the goals are for the team?
I hope to move up on the depth chart on defense and offense, and for the team, hope we can, like he said, score more touchdowns and finish drives.
That might be the biggest thing, is finishing the drives, huh? Because I've talked with Coach several times about, especially even in the Black River game, we were able to move the up and down the field very quickly, but we only scored 1 touchdown where it really meant something. We scored 1 at the end, but you were able to move the ball. It's just that whatever reason, for mistakes or penalties and so on, was tough. Well, Coach, you're going to be beginning your 6th year. You just finished your 5th. That means you have tenure, right?
Something like that.
Exactly. I know that the secret to any season is a fast start. And we know we play 3 non-conference games at the beginning. We know that all 3 teams are going to be the same that we had last year, be this year. We don't know about graduations or anything like that. Maybe you've looked at that. But obviously, the start is the most important part. It sets the tone for the whole entire team for the year.
Yeah, it does. And for us, it's limiting those distractions at the end of August, county fairs and family vacations, and honing into our playbook and what we need to do, and then being prepared to do that, battle the heat, take care of our bodies, and limit injuries and cramps. The injuries thing kind of really got us this year. In the first 3, for the first time in my tenure, we lost all 3 non-conference games. So we just got to be ready to go and hopefully get that fast start so that we're more prepared for that conference schedule.
And then add one more thing in there. All the guys are going to be getting a new year academically, and so that's all brand new also. So in addition to all those things you mentioned, academics being a very important part in the beginning of the school year.
Oh yeah, they have a lot of things going on, so they have to find a way to buckle down in many different phases of their life.
How do you motivate them in all of those things? How do you, minus the injuries of course, but how do you motivate them to do all of these things that they have to do at the beginning of the year?
To be honest, it's on them, and luckily as a coach, I've been blessed with great guys and players, and they motivate themselves and lead themselves to do the right things.
Now, from a coaching standpoint, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about all the other coaches that are helping you. Name those.
Yeah, my brother John Howells runs the defense. Coach Matt Kimmick runs the special teams and helps with JV. Coach Dylan Lowry also helps with offense and runs the JV team. And we had 3 newcomers this year. They were huge additions to our staff. The expertise, the knowledge, and Coach Mike Akers, he's a former head coach, most recently at Oberlin. But he's had several different stops in Lorraine County, and then his assistants in Gary Huff and Tom Hicks.
Well, certainly, I'm sure provided a lot of help for you on the both the offense and defensive side of the board, special teams, and so on. Well, Alex, next year, if everybody comes back, I'm hoping you come back. We're going to have 2 sophomore quarterbacks in addition to 1 junior quarterback, that being Landon Wright. Now, Coach mentioned that he always this year was talking about the fact that it was going to be a 2 quarterback system. How do you yourself fit in, or how do you feel you fit in as a quarterback? We hope that Landon will be fine, there won't be any problems or anything like that. How do you feel yourself fitting in as say the number 2 quarterback on the team?
Even if Landon does get hurt, then I obviously have to step up and try to help the team out on offense. But hopefully that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well, how do you support, especially if Landon's fine? How do you support Landon? How do you support the rest of the team as they said, the second string quarterback? Well, is there something where you are actually listen in on what the play calling is, what can you expect as far as play calling, things like that?
Yeah, I know some of the plays. I ran some of them when CJ and Landon were out.
Mhm.
I had to run, so I know some of them.
It's got to be, I'm sure it's kind of tough, especially if, and we perish the thought, if something happens to Landon. But you've got to be ready, right? What is it called? Next man up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly right. Well, Coach, how will only 6 seniors this year, it'll change the dynamic. 2 years ago, we had 14 seniors, I believe. This year, we had 12 seniors, and minus the injuries and things like that. This year, we're only going to have 16. How does that play into the mix?
I mean, it's huge, but with the way we go about things in our culture in our locker room, everyone's a leader. We try to give everybody a voice, and really our leaders probably came out of the guys that are returning last year. Obviously, you have seniors that do senior things and say the right things and go about it, but we have a group of guys that do it with their actions and practice and in the games, and a group of guys that surround them with their voices. And so it'll be different. We don't have 12 and 14 seniors respectively. We just have 6 returning for sure that we know of. Hopefully some of those other guys that played in the years past decide to come back out and help. But I have confidence in the guys that are going to be juniors and sophomores that we saw this year to step in and fill any sort of leadership role that will be left by the graduating seniors.
Exactly. Well, Alex, we know on defense we changed things halfway through the year. Did you see any difference in the play calling for the last 5 games? Because we won 3 out of the last 5 games. What changed? What was different? And I'm sure, the competition was different, obviously. But what was different in winning 3 out of the 5 games, whereas the first part of the year, we had our problems?
Yeah, it was different. People were switching positions. People weren't there, coming back. So we had Devin come back. He went to tight end for a game, which was different. CJ was there and got hurt, so we had to make changes for him too.
Was play calling any different?
We
You look at you look at CJ
Yeah.
and what he is, what he can do, what his skill set is, versus Landon, what his skill set is. And we can even look at you and your skill set. What changed, if there was any change, in that second half of the season?
We got some new plays. I mean,
And that's always good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Again, we were talking on the defensive side of the ball. They have to react to whatever those changes are and the new plays and things like that. Well, Coach, we've talked all around it. We were successful in moving the ball up and down the field, but for whatever reason, we had our problems punching it in. What is going to change next year?
Just a better focus on the red zone and taking care of the football. You alluded to the Black River game, and it was one of many where we were able to do some really nice things against a tough defense and move the football. But you can't turn it over on the right side of the 50. You can't turn it over inside the 20, and definitely have to clean up penalties and holdings and mental mistakes that knock you out of scoring position and make it a 3rd and long or 4th and long. We have to keep those down on distance manageable and find ways to finish drives.
Here's a word: discipline. How do you impart discipline on those problems that you were talking about?
Well, there's different things that we try to go to in practice this year. One, we did up-downs on Mondays for every yard of penalties that we had. So I think the most up-downs we did on a given Monday was 90.
Wow.
But so we do conditioning things. We also do the same thing with staying on sides and watching the ball and the snap count. So I think it's a practice thing and mindset, and then hopefully it just rolls over in the game.
Here's a question we didn't talk about, but you just brought it up: conditioning. How is conditioning, and how do you see it at the beginning of the year, maybe towards the middle of the end of the year, especially including all the injuries that you might have to face?
Yeah, well, and obviously injuries play a key role in what you do in practice, how physical you can be in practice, how much you run, things like that. I try to have it heavy in training camp in 2 days. Do a lot of running conditioning right off the start, and then as the season goes, taper it a little bit, not do as much to take care of our bodies. Football can be a hard, tough game, and especially then when you start looking at your injuries, by week 6 or 7, you're either in shape or you're not. So a couple extra 40s or 20s isn't going to make or break us.
Now, you mentioned the fact that what was it right after the season was done. I think you said 11 guys were waiting to get into the weight room. That certainly shows good spirit. But do you feel at the beginning of the year they come in very good shape, kind of okay, or not in shape? In other words, is the spirit there? Like you said, there were 11 guys waiting there to get into the weight room.
Yeah, and again, that depends on your mindset. You know, what did you do all summer? What did you do to get better? There are some guys that come in phenomenal shape and probably get in worse shape as the season goes on. And then there's some guys that come right in the middle and they get caught up. And then there's some guys that, you know, take a while to get caught up and finding their way and then, you know, come on late.
Yeah. Well, we have one more question before we end this, and it's to Coach. And it's kind of the same question that I asked you last year. And that is, I predict next year the Wellington High School football team will
Be conference champs.
There you go. That's a good goal. And we were talking about goals, right? That's a good goal. Well, once again, we'd like to thank both Coach Howells and Alex Frenk and Trey Moore for coming in and talking to us about football. But before we end this particular episode, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Joe Fox. For those of you who may have already seen it, Joe Fox in the district cross-country championships came in 11th and qualified for the regionals, which were last Saturday, and in the regionals last Saturday, he also came in 11th and qualified for state cross-country championships. It's the first time in 22 years somebody from Wellington High School has qualified for state in the cross-country championships. So once again, if you see Joe Fox in the hall, tell him congratulations, tell him good luck, and congratulations to him especially since he will be, as I said, the first cross-country runner from Wellington High School to qualify for state championships in 22 years. We'll be back again very soon with another episode of Dialogue with the Dukes.